let's break down a new signing for the New Orleans Saints. It happened while we were on the air here in this first hour. The New Orleans Saints have signed an old face back to the same place. It is Brandin Cooks, veteran wide receiver who was drafted by New Orleans in the first round back in 2014. He spent 3 seasons in New Orleans and was moved to New England via trade. He spent a couple of years with the Rams, spent some time in Houston, and has recently been with the Dallas Cowboys for a couple of seasons. Cooks will play this year his age 32 season. I'll be honest here, I don't like this signing a lot at all. You're talking about a 32-year-old receiver who has declined in production each of the last 5 seasons. He had 1,100 yards as in 2020, then went down to 1,037, down to 699, 657, and last year in only 10 games had 259 yards and 3 touchdowns. I understand the thought. Okay, you bring him in. He's an experienced vet. He's a third option behind Olave and Shaheed. But to me, this is a guy who he's not that expensive. You're talking about $8 million a year for 2 years. But I just don't have any interest in spending any money on Brandin Cooks because he's declining in production. He's getting up in age. The Saints are not in a position to win right now. Like, we talked to Luke Johnson about this a little bit earlier this week, and he was like, I think they should sign one of these veteran receivers, whether it's Brandin Cooks, whether it's Amari Cooper. Some of these guys, they flirted with Cooper Kupp for a little bit. And I understand the thought, but I'm not generally in spend mode with the Saints, and it's going to have to really have some upside to it for me to agree to it. Like, the Chase Young signing is not roundly agreed with. There are some that don't, certainly in this building at this station. There are some that don't agree with the Saints, but I can see it. Like, that's a guy who had some production this year. His numbers, his advanced metrics are actually better than the production on the stat sheet, and he's 25 years old. Like, there's a lot in the tank for Chase Young at a vital position, and he's not expensive relative to the elite players that expensive at that position. Cooks is not breaking the bank here, but I just don't care about adding a receiver to this team. I'd rather just save money. Like, that's kind of where I am with the Saints. So, yeah, they had a bad receiving core last year. Yeah, injuries riddled it, and they ended up going to sign guys off the street, and MVS was doing everything. Like, I understand the situation, but I just don't think there's a ton of gas left in Brandin Cooks' tank. I don't think he gives the Saints something they don't already have. He doesn't bring elite size and physicality. If you're talking about 5'10", 6'1" receivers, you've got Olave and you've got a speed burner in Shaheed. Like, Cooks is just kind of another guy, and he didn't do very much in Dallas the last 2 years. So I'm not wild about this signing. I'd rather take a flyer on an undrafted guy or a late-round draft choice to try to make the team for no money that could potentially stick around for a little bit longer. Like, it's certainly not going to cripple the New Orleans Saints to go out and find Brandin Cooks, but I don't see a lot of value in bringing him in. If you think, well, he's a pro, he can teach the young receivers the ropes. Like, how young are Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed? Like, those guys are not exactly rookies anymore. So this is not one that excites me a ton. And the Saints continue to kind of go out and spend money on guys in their 30s. And I just don't love the idea. I like young. I like cheap. Brandin Cooks is not young. And so I'm kind of anti this deal. Taylor, you've watched this guy play for 2 years in Dallas. I saw you nodding your head along as I kind of said I don't really love the signing. It appears that you don't think it's a great move by the New Orleans Saints either.
You signed older, slower Rashid Shaheed is what you did. Yeah. That's what you brought him in for 2 years ago to do. Dallas brought him in, and they said, hey, we want a guy that can take a little bit of the pressure off of CeeDee Lamb. First year, 600 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like, he was fine last year in and out of the lineup because of injury, but even when he was on the field, he kind of got passed up by Jalen Tolbert. If you're asking yourself, who's Jalen Tolbert, that's kind of my point here. He just got passed up. He's a lot slower. He's undersized. I mean, if you were going to do this, I probably would have just brought back Marquez Valdes-Scantling.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Saints in the next hour about kind of where they are in terms of their perception of where they are and where everyone else's perception is. But this feels like a move for a contending team, not a team that is where the Saints are. And I don't love the deal. So we'll see what he's able to do. He's an 11-year veteran in the league, and it's been It's been 11 years since the since the Saints drafted him in the first round, and he had a string of 1,000-yard seasons in his second, third, fourth, fifth years. He went over 1,000 yards and then did it 2 more times after a season where he was hurt in Los Angeles. But this guy, his production's declined 5 years in a row. I'm not over the moon about this signing here, but it's not unexpected. We figured the Saints would dip into the veteran market here in free agency for a wide receiver, and they have with Brandin Cooks on a 2-year deal. It's going to be 33 when this thing ends. I don't love it.